welcome everybody. I'm Caroline Chaffer, one of the Associate Deans for Teaching and Learning in the School for Business and Society. It's really lovely to actually introduce myself in the sense of talking about business and society, because it's amazing to see how many people are here from across the faculty. So if you're not from the school, then you're very, very, very welcome. So this is the first of 7 workshops that myself and the Dean have organised. I've run between now and April. And the reason we kind of had the idea for the series is we were thinking about kind of how we're going to support our students in the context of the emergence of AI and different AI tools, and thinking about how we best do that. So we were worrying about that, I guess, from the perspective of our roles as the Dean is Programme Leader for Global Marketing, and as I mentioned, I'm one of the Associate Deans for Teaching and Learning. So we were kind of thinking about the best way of upskilling ourselves and thinking about how we can best support our students on the programme. So it's very much informed in some ways by our needs, but in terms of the focus or the framework that we thought about. So the idea for the workshops is based on kind of our own challenges that we were facing, but in terms of a framework we've drawn on, there's lots of AI literacy frameworks out there, but we've drawn on a framework by Hillier. And what Hillier suggests was, if we're going to kind of be equipped to face this changing world, then, we kind of need to build our knowledge, starting at the basics, and then thinking about kind of different tools are available and the effectiveness of those tools, and then start to think about only when we understand those basics can we then kind of explore AI in the context of teaching and learning. So the workshops that we've kind of devised over the next 4 months kind of start with the basics and then build. So the first 2 workshops, I'm delighted that Mike O'D from the Department of Computer Science is here to share his experiences. Okay, so in terms of the workshop series, we're starting with the first 2 workshops are the basics. Just in terms of thinking about what do we mean by AI, what are the AI tools that are available to us, starting to think about the limitations and the benefits that these tools can offer. We're then going to explore AI from different perspectives to kind of build up our broader knowledge base, so thinking about it from the perspective of employers, think about EDI, legal, copyright implications, and then starting to then explore AI integration into our teaching and learning, kind of once we've built up those basic tools and concepts, I guess. And then the final 2 are very focused on hands-on experience, start thinking what's it mean for my teaching, what's it mean for my module. So throughout there are opportunities to kind of play around with the tools, and we've got people in the room who, beyond myself and the Dean, who know more about some of these tools, so it's an opportunity really to network and share ideas. The 2 events that are in blue, just the reason we've highlighted those is you need to sign up through Eventbrite. They're external events, so don't just sign up via Zoom. So if you want to come, there is a link in the calendar, but just make sure you do sign up. So before we kick off with the first one, and just some kind of other things just to note, as part of supporting colleagues CPD, if people attend more than 4 of the workshops, there will be a certificate of attendance and other people in terms of PDRs, links to professional accreditations, things to demonstrate engagement in training. So there's an opportunity to do that if you attend 4 workshops or more. And then to help myself and the Dean just evaluate the workshops, think about how they're going, and explore how effective they've been. We have kind of wrapped this up as part of a research project. So before we start, if people online and people in the room, if you wouldn't mind a QR code, it's completely optional, you don't have to fill it in, and it's anonymous. If you could fill in the questionnaire, we want to kind of gauge where people are at now and think about kind of the effectiveness of the framework and the training as we go through it over the next 4 months. So if you want to fill it in, it'd be helpful to us. As I say, it's completely optional, and it's not a requirement in terms of attending the workshops. Okay, we'll make a start. Thank you for doing that, those that have completed. As I said, we'll send the slides around afterwards anyway. I'm delighted that this workshop and the next workshop is going to be led by Mike O'D, who's one of our colleagues in the computer science department. So I'm going to hand over to Mike, and he's going to kind of teach us the AI basics. Just in terms of questions, what we're going to do is I'll keep an eye, and Nadine will keep an eye on questions in the chat. We will kind of pause at particular times if there are groups of questions, so rather than kind of stopping Mike as we go along, we'll kind of pause periodically if there are questions online. But see if anyone's got a question in the room, then raise your hand as appropriate, and we'll just take them as we go along. So I'm going to hand over to Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Hi everybody, nice to be here. I've hauled all the way across from the other campus to be here today. So I know some of you, but most of you probably don't. I'm new to you. The reason I'm here is I'm interested in AI literacy. That's one of my research areas, but my background is in machine learning and AI. The reason I'm in AI literacy is I'm a teaching and scholarship lecturer, so that's where I apply my sort of things. So I'm actually going to go back to Caroline and Nadine's slide just to say to you, look, where my workshops fit in are today here. Right, looking at just giving you a basic background knowledge of AI, some of the affordances and the introduction to some of the tools. But next workshop, hopefully, I'll cover the basics, the foundations of those to enable the further workshops to start off a little bit faster or not from scratch. And that's purely by coincidence, actually. So what I'm going to look at today is I had a chat with Nadine and Caroline beforehand, and I thought it might be useful for me just to explain not what AI is, but some of the different types of AI. Because they've changed quite a lot and there's a little bit of confusion about what's this type of AI, where does ChatGPT fit in, what's machine learning, how do neural networks fit into machine learning and things like that. So I thought I'd just spend a couple of minutes doing that, and then from there on I'd like to look at sort of the uses of AI in education, some of the affordances, and I'm not sure it's the right word, disaffordances. Other people think limitations, annoyances, whatever. And then the last bit is a bit that I'm quite interested in. It's called prompt engineering, and essentially it's how to get the best out of Gen AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot. There are certain techniques. And in essence, although I'm going through all of AI, it's Gen AI that's probably the one that's most appropriate for all of you. It's the one that's causing most thought for most of you, and it's certainly the one that's going to have the most impact on your teaching and learning. So therefore, this last bit here is moving towards really focusing on using Gen AI. Okay? So I'd like to leave some time for that in the end, and I've just realized that, as I normally do, and as my students tell me off for, I've described the slide before I've actually got to it. But essentially, ChatGPT has hit us like a steam train. It's disrupted everything. It's thrown into question all of our practices, particularly our assessment practices, and we can't stick our head in the sand. So we have to at least know a little bit about it before we decide how we're going to work with it, against it, hopefully not for it. And that's why I'm here. So you've heard, if you've read on AI, you've probably heard lots of things about how we describe AI. So we have artificial general intelligence, which is basically going to replace us as humans. If you listen to some of the commentators, we hear about narrow intelligence, and so on and so forth. Artificial general intelligence, whether it happens or not in mine or our lifetime, I simply don't know. My personal opinion is it probably won't. There'll be people saying, oh yes, AI is sentient, this, that, and the other, it's aware of itself, this is artificial general intelligence. It won't be as we think it will be, which it will be an AI human. Right? But there will be certain areas where it has a massive impact on what we do, and there will be certain areas where it replaces what we do. However, probably the better way to think about it is the outputs. What does AI output? What is it used for? And in that respect, I'm going to introduce something called statistical versus probabilistic AI, and I'm glad I pronounced that right first time. And I've done a very simple diagram, and these are the outputs, or my classification of AI. So we had the very early, what we call search or optimization algorithms, the traveling salesman problem, right, searching through mazes. Right, this is the old stuff. And I know it's the old stuff because I did AI for my master's, and it was in the 90s, and that's what I studied. We still use it, robots still use it and things like that, but it is hard-coded, it gives us a solid, reliable answer that we know what it is. Then we have machine learning, which any of you who are data analytics, business analytics, health analytics, you will know about. So in marketing, classifying, clustering, your customers, your products or whatever. This is the stuff, this is what classical machine learning does. And it's also very clear. It's mathematical, it's statistical. When we do it, we can see the outputs, we can trace them back, we know exactly what it's done. Now we are moving, vast majority of the stuff that we're working with, certainly in computer science, is neural networks, which people say they mimic the brain. They mimic the way that the brain operates. And what we do is now we have complex connections in our systems. And what they do is they classify or they predict. So we can classify things, and we use that for facial recognition, for pattern recognition. We predict, we use that for sophisticated regressions. But neural networks are more difficult for us in terms of, because they're way more complex than this. I could explain to you a classical machine learning algorithm. You'd probably be bored, but I could explain it to you. I couldn't a neural network. I couldn't tell you exactly what it's doing. I can tell you all the layers in some of them, and I can tell you what those layers do, but how the connection then works through to how we get to the end result, the output, it's pretty complicated. I'd have to run some programs to tell you, look, this input has this kind of weighting on the output. And from there, we have the next generation, generative AI, which is way more complicated than some of our early neural networks. And even the people who make that don't know what it's doing internally. It's a black box. And not only that, it's changing all the time. So if we did know all the connections, and there are about 3 billion of them in ChatGPT, to get one answer, the next time you put the same question in for the same answer, they would be different. And that now is completely changed the way of looking at things. So we have kind of this. These are statistical. We know what they're doing. These are probabilistic in terms of the networks using or use probability to find the answer. The best example I can give to you of the difference between this is chatbots. A chatbot will sit here. It's a neural network. It uses neural networks to do the natural language processing, but we know what it does because we've coded in the answers. ChatGPT is a Gen AI chatbot. We don't know what answer we're going to get. And we don't know how it's got there. And we can't explain to you how the answer is, whereas I could with a chatbot. So these are the main issues of AI, right? And the things that probably explain it from a different way. The idea of statistical versus probability, and the transparency or the explainability of the algorithms. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions on that?
Can I ask a question about the probability? Is it about the number of respondents do something that they say, if the sky is red, and everybody says the same thing, will it give us that answer?
Yes. So to take a very simple ChatGPT question, in fact, it's never simple, but to take what the natural language processing does is it takes the sentence that's been input and it breaks it down into smaller bits. In Gen AI, they're called tokens. Right, and those tokens have had natural language processing already done on them. So we do things like stemming words, which basically reduces the word to its basic fundamental word. And then we do something called lemmatization, which the different variations of the word become the same sort of semantic meaning. And then we put them together, and then we have another bit of natural language processing that puts them in order of subject, object, verb, adjective, and so on. But then after that, ChatGPT takes over. And essentially what it does, it's got the massive databases of probabilities. When we have this word, what's the most probable next word? And when we have this combination, what's the most probable? And that can change. And that's where we have the issue. So does that help?
Might be a naughty question, but how does the explainability, is it the explainability and transparency affected by reinforcement learning and what we're seeing in kind of
It is.
in those kind of things? So is there a moment to open up, back up the or are you saying that the background is still a black box, it's just that it's trying to tell you what it's doing as it's doing it?
The more complex we get down here, the more connections, the larger the sort of the neural network we're dealing with. So what we can do is we can test at the beginning and the end. So we can do what we call black box testing in computer science, which is we see the inputs and we look at the outputs and we try and figure out what's gone in the middle. In fact, we don't really care what's gone on in the middle. What we want to know is what's happened in there. And we have techniques like, for example, certain things called Shapley values, which will allow us to show the weightings of the inputs and how those weightings have influenced the output, which is fine and works reasonably well for neural networks that don't change, like reinforcement learning. And Gen AI, which change like that all the time. So even if you put the same question in and you hit return, the neural network is going to change each time. And therein lies our problem. Does that help? So Gen AI is a subset of neural networks. So they are a particular type of neural network. So ChatGPT is called a transformer. And I've got a slide in a minute that shows you the different types of ones. But they are a specific type of neural network. And the thing about them is the architecture. So the transformer architecture, the reason why Gen AI is completely different to anything we've had before is that that can pass data back and forward. Whereas previously, our neural networks were predominantly what we call feed forward. They only went one way. And that's what makes it different. That's what gives it a power that the others don't have. But it is a neural network, but it's a huge one. So when it says it has 3 billion nodes, what effectively that is, the nodes is a combination of the tokens and the connections possible. So at the moment, the top ends are just around 3 billion, but it's possible for them to get even larger. And with a network that size, we can't trace it. We can't go through. Does that help? Okay, I shall move on to the next one then. So we have 4 different types. This is really just for your information. Not every Gen AI is a GPT, but we have image recognition, Gen AIs, and they're the older version. We call them adversarial networks. Autoencoders, so I generate synthetic data for my assignments because I do a lot of data, big data stuff. And after a while, Kaggle runs out. So I use these are sort of programming. I program in Python. This is what LLMs are. They are transformers. And GPT is not the only one. BERT is the Google one. And then we have latent diffusion models, which are what are used for image or music record generation. So what they do is essentially if you're interested, they introduce noise and then they denoise to move to create images and music. That's how they work. But really, this is very quickly to say, not all Gen AI is ChatGPT. So that's the background. I suspect that I could go on for the entire workshop if you lot wanted to, but I'll move on. This is what we have here at York. Right. We have the Google tools, Gemini and Dialogflow. So some of you may have come to my workshop on chatbots. Nadine. Sorry, I'm pointing at University of York tools.
To the previous slide, Agnieszka is asking, so where would DeepSeek sit? I don't know what that is, but I'm sure you do.
DeepSeek is the Chinese version of ChatGPT that was introduced or hit the headlines last week. Now, I understand I'm pretty certain that's a transformer architecture because it's a large language model.
Brilliant. Yeah, and then Ali has a question to what the license status on those ones, and then I'm going to stop.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I was going to say that as best I could. So alongside this are generally available tools. The next line down, which is I'm pointing at, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Claude, DALL-E, Llama. These are ones that are freely available, but they are not available to us under University of York license. So the reason why I've got this slide up is, well, when I wrote this an hour ago, the University of York tools are supposed to be safe. What that means is that you can put information that's internal to University of York and it will not go outside of the organization. However, just before I walked in here, I phoned up IT service support and said, I just want to clarify what our Copilot license is. And they're not entirely sure. So, okay, sorry, I've got a Padlet here. I'm on the online learning team, we use Padlets. But it would be nice as well to grab. Sorry, the reason why I'm rushing is I've got another slide and I don't want to explain it before I get to it yet again. So I would be grateful if you could, when you've got the time, upload or enter what kind of usage of AI we have, or you have. Because actually one of the bits of AI literacy is finding out where people are at the moment. And so, coming back then to our University of York software, this is Google Gemini, which is the recommended large language model that we have at the university. It's supposed to be contained within our organization. Personally, I don't believe any of the big tech organizations, and I would not be comfortable that there is no guarantee, or there's a guarantee that information will not leak out. What I would not do is put any personal information, any research data that you don't think should be published when you put it in. Because although it doesn't go outside of the organization, it will stay still in general view within the organization. So here's an example. It's confusing. So I did this at home, and my computer at home has my home logged in as my home Gmail account. So when I went into Gemini, that's what I was logged in as. This is my university account. So if I was going to use it for work, I would need to make sure that that is up there. Copilot, as I was saying, we have a license. It's web-based, which means that I was testing out this morning as well, and looking and thinking, why the hell can't I get Copilot to work with Microsoft Word and Excel the way that it tells me it should do? Because, and I'm pointing here at the top diagram, Copilot should be a big button in Word, Excel, PowerPoint for it to be integrated. And it should pop up when you open for a blank new document. It doesn't. So I managed to clarify with IT services that we have a web-based, which means that we can use Copilot. We do have a license for it, but it's not integrated with Microsoft 365, which therefore leads me to suspect that it isn't also firewalled from the rest of the world. And also, don't make the mistake of going in, doing an add-on to Word or Microsoft and seeing ChatGPT for Microsoft Word, because it's integrated too. I think this is a general ChatGPT license, and again, is not firewalled. So beware of Copilot.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
If we're using Copilot standalone, then not integrated into Word, as in you're just asking it questions, is that firewalled?
No, I think that's just the same as if you're going into the web and using ChatGPT.
Even
Right.
if you're logged in under your university account?
Well, IT support still haven't got back to me, so I don't know either way. And if, in that case, my advice to you would be, don't assume that it is safe.
Mine? Can I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Sure, yeah.
Honestly, a stupid question from someone who's does
stupid.
it really matter?
Yes, it does.
The reason why I ask that is, I mean, if you have got 3 billion nodes, you know, and I'm a tiny little minuscule drop in a massive ocean. What are the chances? I'm just trying to work this out,
Yeah.
because clearly.
No, it's a very good
also,
question.
Shit, I've really made some stupid mistakes before. Then in using these things before. Do I really have to be worried about that now?
Amazon stopped their engineers using ChatGPT because they found out that what was coming back was proprietary Amazon code, internal to the organization, stuff that actually they needed to give them a competitive advantage over their competitors. That was coming out through ChatGPT, available to anyone who uses ChatGPT. So the probability, so if you were doing some research and you said, I'll stick it into ChatGPT to tidy it up, to make it look really nice, because ChatGPT, I'll freely admit ChatGPT's English is much better than mine, and I was born and brought up here, and I can read and write. It's better than mine. So I would be tempted to stick it in there, and it tidies it all up. As soon as you stick it in there, it's the equivalent virtually of saying, right, I am publishing it, and anyone can open source access that. Because if you've got a complex argument, or if you've got a very clear argument, which your research probably should have, that's specific to your research, anyone who puts in a phrase that's similar to that, that's going to pop up as the most probable outcome. So, yes, I think it is. I think you do need to be careful, and especially you need to be careful with personal information, because it's there. It's like sticking it into the database that anyone could access. Does that help?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, uses. Most of you know what it's used for, but I just thought a couple of helpful slides. How are we doing for time? We're okay.
22, yeah.
So this is JISC. that I won't claim I found it, Caroline found it for me. And it gives you just some of the common usages. So I'm walking back and forwards here across the screen pointing. Some of the common usages that we just, from their survey, found students using. Okay? As a research tool, exploring, using it basically as a cognitive sounding board, coaching, sort of a mentorship, which in their eyes is the more acceptable compared to let's just stick the question in and get the answer. Okay? Which is, according to GIST, least acceptable use. But this is the gamut, the range of what they are doing. And in fact, it's a lot more than that because they're a lot more innovative than basically we are in terms of using it. This is an awful slide, but it was the best I could find to kind of put all the types of usage possible, no, not possible, probable at the moment, for generative AI. And in fact, AI as well, because there's some usage in there that I would say, right, this is not a Gen AI usage, but it is AI usage that we could possibly use as educators. So for example, detection. Gen AI isn't a very good detection tool in terms of detecting spam, patterns, and whatever. But there are detection tools available to us as educators that are very useful for us. Decision-making tools. So one of my pet bugbears is the sheer amount of processes and procedures that I have to deal with. And at each stage, I have this Google form to work with, I have this email. I would love to automate it, as I did in the mid-1990s. AI is very, very good at that. I've been looking at something called Google Classroom, which I hope might work for us. But it's very good at that kind of thing, the digital assistant, and automating things, and producing letters and stuff like that. So we have all of these things and more, but these are the main sort of usage, common usage of AI related to education. Which brings me on to the next bit then, is how the hell do we deal with it? It does so many things, and with Gen AI, it's so easy to use now. How do we incorporate that in our teaching and learning? Now, I'm not going to go into detail because then Nadine's going to be pissed off at me because I will have taken one of her workshops from her. But all I'm going to say is that essentially there are three paradigms to working with AI. I've heard some people say they are not mutually exclusive. I would say they are. The first one is AI directed. It's our, how should I put it? Well, we have programming tutors in computer science, which basically tell the students how to program. They debug their code, they set exercises, and they're AI, and they work really well. But they're telling the student what to do. So here, it's based on the behaviorism approach of practice, repetition, and so on. Paradigm 2, AI-supported learning, is probably what most of us think of now in terms of how we're going to cope with AI. So ChatGPT, we need to find a way of it being a tool rather than it being something that circumvents our learning. And so we've got, you could call ChatGPT, if we worked with it well, a dialogue-based tutoring system. If our students used it the way that we wanted them to use it. Or an exploratory learning environment. if we said, right, go and find out something, use ChatGPT, don't rely on it, and then apply higher order thinking skills. Paradigm 3, I think, could go two ways. But essentially, this is free for all. We're assuming that ChatGPT is what it is, does what it is, and we're going to have to change. But the only way it's going to work for us is if we're going to change so that we cooperate with AI, and AI cooperates with us rather than AI imposing what it does on how we operate. And that goes not just for learning, that goes for life. But this could go either way. It depends what the tech companies do, it depends what universities do, it depends what society does. So I thought that would be something to sort of, I guess, we need to raise at this early point in the discussion. Everyone happy with that? Okay. So how do we get there? Oregon State University, this is their improvement on Bloom's taxonomy. And what they're saying here is this is where AI fits, right, in terms of the AI activities. And the first thing to notice is AI fits all the way through the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And what they're saying here as well is that this is the human skills, the thinking skills, that AI will enable at the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And I think that's a fairly good and certainly useful reimagining of Bloom's taxonomy. But I'd like to show you an alternative one. So I'm pointing at the Bloom's taxonomy triangle here, and where we have the green ticks at remembering and analysing, that's to indicate that Gen AI is actually fairly good and fairly helpful in these kinds of activities. Where we have the yellow triangle with the exclamation mark is where they consider Gen AI to actually be counterproductive, dangerous in terms of education or what we're trying to do. So patterning. Gen AI is going to impose standard patterns, the most common patterns. And we would want our students to create their own patterns, certainly in computer science. And yes, people say Gen AI is creative. It is. And it's getting better, but it still has serious flaws in terms of what it does. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but if we're using it to educate, our students are not really creating. And where the journey's out, where we have this sort of emoji of a person with the crossed hands in front of them, this is where understanding. Does ChatGPT truly understand or enable our users, students, to truly understand when they put a question in? The answer is most of the time, yes. But I think I may have given this example to some of you before, so please excuse me if I'm repeating myself. But I was doing a research project, and for my faults, I was doing the statistical analysis of a questionnaire. And because we hadn't got it quite right when I was doing the confirmatory factor analysis, I couldn't get a Cohen's alpha above 0.6. So I was thinking, what the hell do I do? So I put into ChatGPT, is there an alternative? And it came up with something called Craven's alpha. And it gave me a formula for it, and I looked at it, and I'm reasonably good at statistics, and it looked good to me. The formula looked okay, so I thought, let me just cross-check this, because I've never heard of Craven's alpha, and I could not find it anywhere. Then, saying a lot about my past as a hockey player, we used to, when we were drunk, used to sing a song called Craven A, which was a cigarette brand. And I think that's where the probability came from.
Right. There's an interesting reflection in the chat. So someone saying they've used this as a way of evaluating with students how good or bad Gemini is. So it's a
I think that's a very good point.
Interesting tool to integrate into their teaching.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to show the students and give some examples of how it can catch you out. Now, most of the time it's pretty good, but unless you are aware of potential issues, then you could come badly unstuck. If I'd gone through and published under Craven's A, that would have been the end of my... Okay, so here we are. Okay, so here's another way of looking at it in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. So now affordances. There are key issues which I've alluded to, which we will be looking at later. Ethics, transparency, explainability, reliability, biases, poisoning of LLM, which Natalie is particularly interested in. Not sure what that says about her, but so deliberately corrupting the database. And issues of intellectual property and GDPR. So we'll look at these later, but I'll just quickly go on to affordances before we go on to the workshop. So we can look at the affordances and the challenges, the disaffordances, whatever, in a number of areas. Data privacy and security. We have here Gemini, which is supposed to be the secure private version within York University. And we have the issue of Copilot, ChatGPT, which is not. Bias, fairness, transparency, explainability. I've kind of gone over some of those, but when I first did computer science, there was the phrase that was given to us, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And what we found with LLMs is that ChatGPT 3.5, when they were working on ChatGPT 4 with a larger data set to train on, it suddenly became racist, it became misogynist, it became unpleasant. We don't exactly know how, but I suspect it's because as the database got bigger, it moved into more and more unpleasant areas of the internet. And so that became part of its data set. So it became biased in certain ways. The output quality and reliability in earlier neural networks, reliable, good quality. Now we simply don't know. We've got to cross-check. Prompt engineering is a way of working with Gen AI, which I'll come on to in a second. Intellectual property and plagiarism. Does anyone know what the legal issues regarding AI output is? We can't patent it, we can't copyright it. But you also can't sue someone for plagiarism or ChatGPT for plagiarism because it hasn't been produced by a human. Right, so if there are any lawyers in here, you probably know it better than me, ChatGPT would have corrected me. But yes, even as someone who knows quite a bit about AI, I still don't know much about the legal issues.
I know about, I'm not an expert either, but I do know through one project that I'm funded to do at the moment, there's another project which is being run under the same programme, where they're looking at this from the point of view of voice rights. So in other words, because you can now, in fact, you have your voice claimed, it's even relatively easy to create a non-AI version of your voice, using this happens with celebrities and stuff like that. They're looking into kind of creating a legal framework around that, because at the moment a lot of the legal architecture most doesn't exist, really. So it's quite an interesting test case. So I think they're working on that area, and presumably there are other people trying to look at implications of generative AI in other domains, but that's the one I know about.
Yeah, it's hugely complex as well. You know, the deep fakes, the issue at the moment is what laws have they broken?
That's right.
I think there was I'm not sure where this case is now, but there was one with Getty Images that was flagged a while back, because they had the older, if you asked Dali to produce an image in a historic style or something, it would over-rely on Getty Images that it had scraped from the internet, and to the extent that it was producing the Getty Images logo in its output, and that they used this as leverage in a case against it. But I'm not sure what the actual outcome was.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't know the outcome either. And as well, we don't know where it's getting it from, because we can't prove where it's come from. Again, Nadine.
Yeah, I'm reading out what Ben says. He says copyright for music is a mess. Google et al. Are making a grab for all music to create AI models at the moment. Musicians union involved, huge issues. He also pointed out that the AI is getting pretty good in developing likable music patterns. So not from me, that's Ben of mine.
He's one of my colleagues in ACT who wanted to join the session. I said, sure, have the link. So it's good that he's posting stuff. So it's very interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
But I didn't try to imitate the voice.
But he's another joint music composer, so.
Yeah.
So there's something here about how we cite it then, and how students should cite it then. Is there, with regard to...
Yes. No.
Yeah. So the university has rules and regulations, so you can actually find on their website how they recommend that AI usage is being cited, depending on to what level you're using it. And there are links available, or just go on the website and look it up if you want to use it. There are big working groups around this. They're meeting very often.
But I was also thinking about us as with me, like Grammarly, or using Gemini to make something concise, trim the fat. I need to get 1,000 words off this article, right? Right, it's going to take me hours and hours to do it.
So there is a whole group on AI and research, and they are in the process of finalizing a guide for everyone who is using AI in research. And in a nutshell, from someone who has skimmed over it, it basically means whatever your funder and publisher is okay with. It's very cynical, quick summary of it, but there are some information in the guide which are coming out, at least from this university's perspective. Just checking, Oliver's posting a link for subject guidance and referencing.
But they're not going to know, are they?
So that's a whole different conversation. But then in the past, there was a big case in Germany when the internet became bigger first, where politicians were identified who plagiarized their PhDs. So they never thought they would get caught when they first plagiarized their PhDs. So who knows what's possible in the future? Just saying, not saying.
No, I'm saying if you say, please trim the fat off this paragraph, and it takes 10% off, do I then have to say, oh, I have used generative AI in this?
Some journals actually want you to put a statement at the bottom if you used it for some tidying. I don't know if it's in every discipline, but two I've been recently working with kind of said, please put a statement at the bottom if you used it for that kind of stuff, for tidying things up or getting it into the word count. But that's also the conversation. This conversation we are having, students are really struggling with at the same time. So.
Yeah, in the teaching and learning context, new things are coming out all the time, but there are university web pages that provide guidance to questions like that. Devil's in the detail, at this will come on to the future works, it's how we work with our students to make sense in our context, but it kind of gives an overall framework of different ways students can use AI, and it's, I guess the challenge is how we make clear to students how we want them to use it, but it's an emerging area, it's not easy. But there is quite a lot of guidance on the website now, on the university pages, so we can give a link after this.
Yeah, I put the link in anyway, so when we send out the recording, the link for the referencing is in there if that's early enough for people, otherwise.
Yeah, just to give you an example as well, the journal I work with, the journal I'm an assistant editor on as well, they explicitly require you to make an AI declaration of use now, which we only put in about 6 months ago.
But if you've done that and you put it in there, haven't you lost that? Because it's then in the system, that paragraph.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why it's being meant to use systems that you pay for, or systems that are closed and have firewalls. That's the point. But I mean, we've used Word, Grammarly, and various other things to edit our stuff for years and years and years.
Yeah, and there's the issue of
Paying someone to do it for you.
yeah. Yeah, there's the issue of, using AI as a tool, acceptable use, and not. And, we still unclear on some of those. Yeah. Sorry, I have one there.
It may seem a bit marginal to this, but I think it's quite important as well. Can you say something about the environmental footprint of using those tools? Because I've just read recently, just in passing in a newspaper article, that a very basic search on Google is needing kind of only a 33rd or so of the energy that is required for something, a search of similar type in ChatGPT.
Yes, I think most of us are aware of the huge amounts of energy required for large language models. And I read the other week that I think it is Mark Zuckerberg's Meta are thinking of buying their own nuclear power station. So it just gets from bad to worse, really, in terms of the sustainability and the environmental footprint of this. Yeah, and I don't know what we can do about it, especially with them all cozying up to Donald Trump, because they want to be able to do things without any scrutiny. Right.
Just in relation to that, the university has a policy in relation to climate impact, and interconnecting systems, which I learned yesterday are carbon neutral. So the actual servers, etc., computing systems that the university uses for its high-power computing, it actually addresses that, and I think it's going to become a live issue. I'm in the AI and ethics working group, and so precisely those questions are coming up, and we're not addressing it at all. But I think students will be interested in precisely that as a prompt for thinking ethically about the use of it. I just wanted to make a different point, which was about the tool play distinction. So when you've got it inside Word and you've got the button for ChatGPT, the realization that it looks like a tool, but actually it's opening up to that kind of public space, and therefore making your content public, which is why, of course, the university is not licensing that at the moment, I think is also an important prompt to students as well.
Yes, and I think that's our AI literacy. Yeah.
Grammarly, spell checking, inside your word processing document, which is different to press this button, it will go off to ChatGPT, send the content of your document to it, then bring back an answer. I think that's a permeability.
Yeah.
And it also speaks to that tool, let's go and play with this online distinction, which I think is clearly one of the issues that we have to address in teaching environments, to know where that data is going as we're submitting the prompts, or indeed tidying up texts, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's where AI literacy is important for all of us, students, academic staff, professional services, anyone within the university. It's just at the simplest, way to understand what these things are doing.
Yeah. But I think it's a really interesting prompt for that student. Did you know it takes 3 times as many power? Yeah.
I suspect I don't really know how much difference it will make, though, to the use, because, well, yeah. And then the last thing, accessibility and cost. University is providing Gemini. It's providing the more expensive version of Gemini, which is good. But what about other universities, other students, and so on, their ability to pay for these things, which if they can't pay for the latest version, they are at a disadvantage, and so on. And these are things that we also need to be aware of.
isn't it a bit of an oxymoron in saying we're going to give you the most expensive tools, but we don't really want you to use them to their fullest potential, and please use them within the rules?
Who says we're not encouraged to use them?
I just mean as in cheating and not taking that full advantage.
But I think that's part of the workshop series, is to kind of identify how we define cheating and to what extent it's actually important for employability. Environmental impact is important and something we all need to keep in mind, but I think we need to be careful to say we don't want them to cheat their way through the essays. I think so it's down to us to identify what does the essay look like, or what does a future assessment look like, so they're not maybe made it so easy. Because we have essay mills all the way through.
Yeah.
This is an affordable essay mill for everyone,
Yeah.
so we have to finally tackle the issue of someone else doing the work for them.
And I think also to add to that, people have got, I guess, different views on the use of this and how students should be using it. I mean, in my view, it's the responsibility of us to help students get the most out of it and understand the pitfalls of it more than anything, in terms of if you do this, you may not actually kind of get the best out of your learning and get the mark you want, because it's not very good, you know, and help them use the tools to the best of their advantage.
On the other hand, it can be really good.
Yeah,
I just think
that's what I mean.
there is a very negative tone to the discussion. I think that is slightly problematic. You know, for me as an academic looking at submissions from students coming in, well, thank God, because actually the level of writing has improved massively. So I can actually see the idea they're saying now, rather than pointing out basic grammar and terrible paragraphs and, you know, some of the, you know, I feel that there's a bit, I feel really negative about it. It's stealing our ideas, it's cheating, it's, I don't know, it feels...
No, I think it's a tool that can be used for, you know, I was an external examiner to other university. I've seen it used in controlled ways, like brainstorming, and the students are encouraged to use this tool, but declare it, and then from there on they can do their own writing, but they have to provide like a statement of to what extent they have used it, and then provide in the appendix exactly what they asked this tool.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a understanding what can you use it for, and what's the learning outcome of the module in particular. So
Okay, think about us though as well, like, you know,
oh, for research.
why does a journal want me to spend 6 hours of my time finding 10% word count when it can do it in seconds? I don't know, I'm just like...
There's a conversation online, and I just thought I'd throw it in the room so they feel included as well. So Louise kind of posted, are Chinese students now more likely to use DeepSeek? Are there issues with that for the university? And then Ali commented on this and said, Chinese students use AI in every translators anyway, so I'm assuming it fits into that area. And Matthew Hamloff mentioned they might use AI tools we've never heard about anyways. I think he said ... so I put anyways in there.
I think, again, this comes back to AI literacy. It comes back to teaching the students how to use the tools properly. And I'm glad you said about the positive ones, because the next few slides are the positive. But I just thought I'd use a metaphor. I've just happened to watch Night Agent, binge-watched it on Netflix. And the last episode, which I watched late last night... Yeah. No, they did something, they combined sulfuric acid with ethanol, which, according to them, and I haven't fact-checked it yet, instantaneously combusts. So the idea here is saying, in chemistry, we teach our students first how to not blow themselves up, before then we teach them how to make new compounds. And with AI, it's the same thing. How not to screw up your degree first, and now this is how to use it to be creative, to do stuff, to make stuff, to work better. I think that's the same analogy with chemistry, which I was...
Just to bringing people in online, Ali's agreeing with you, saying it's encouraging us to think about a variety of assessments or different ways that we teach skills as well as theory, so some agreement online.
Nadine, is definitely going to address that.
Yeah, I was going to just add an educational analogy from our module, just compared to chemistry. We use AI in business planning, or we trialled it this year, And the first thing that we did in our AI session was ask them to write the business plan in Copilot, copy and paste the question in, and then to mark the answer using the marking rubric. And they all awarded themselves pretty much a third. So that was the starting point of, okay, here's how not to blow yourself up. And now that, that was the beginning of the session. And now let's work out how do we critically engage with the tool to use it, but then to triangulate the data with other sources, and to apply critical thinking as we would to literature, as we would to any other aspect of our learning. I think maybe that's an approach, I guess, that sort of started to work for us.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that what we understand learning to be shifts as well in precisely such exercises, doesn't it? I mean, we talk about critical thinking, but isn't that a brilliant example of that? Actually getting the students to mark some output is an alternative way of learning. And so maybe the ground is shifting as well in a good way.
Yes, there is this concept, which I don't know if you've heard about it, called the post-plagiarism world. Yeah. No, I'm going. Right, I better go very quickly.
There's one more comment online. Sorry, it's not me speaking the whole time. So Pauline is kind of mentioning new computers and phones are available nowadays, and even new licenses for MS Word are now largely AI supported, and one has to opt out if you don't want to actually use them. So everyone is kind of already using it anyways. So it's more kind of being aware of its abilities and limitations. Thank you, Pauline.
Right, I'll go quickly because I know that, well, I wanted to do a little workshop at the end. Can we detect Gen AI? No. Okay. Yeah. The affordances of ChatGPT, I think we've sort of covered that anyway, so I will quickly go through that. What it's good for, have a quick look, but I think you know those too. So I hope you don't mind if I skim through that because yeah, and those are a couple of examples that I was going to give, but I was going to discuss this more next week, but the advantages for it for your teaching, efficiency, as you've said, about, cut 10% off. We can use it to enhance learning and teaching, just like any ed tech. And next week, I'll try and look at some case studies. But to start with Gen AI, there are two techniques that I would like to show you. Prompt engineering. So the first thing, I use the acronym TOMMY. It's based on somebody else's work from Oxford Brookes, and I always forget the chap's name, which is I'm doing him a great disservice. But essentially, topic, output, modifiers, iterate. Right? So to get the best out of generative AI, we can structure our prompts. We can apply a process to them. Firstly, detailed, precise topics will give you the best focused answers. Okay. Then tell it what you want as the output. Okay. So write a summary, act as a debater, act as an apprenticeship or a mentor. So use keywords like summarize, clarify, suggest, specify, propose, or something similar. Then the modifier at the end. How long do you want it to be? What style? Be aware of that. Students cottoned on very quickly that the first generation of AI detectors used a concept called perplexity, which is about how good our language is. So then they said, write it like a 17-year-old. Put some errors in it, and that then screwed that up. Okay, so this is the modifiers, and then be prepared to iterate. Go back and back and back and back until it gets right. It won't get bored with you. It won't lose patience. And then when you get the output, taste it. Okay, test the outputs. If I hadn't tested Craven A's, I probably wouldn't be here now. I'd be in McDonald's or somewhere. Adjust it to get different perspectives, to make the connections in the LLM go a different way, so that you're not getting one probability path. Okay. Simplify. Okay, I'm not very good at this, but simplify the questions. Be direct. Check. In fact, not check, just don't trust it. And then finally, evaluate it. Okay, we know how to evaluate. Our students know how to evaluate something. It should now become part of the process of working with the outputs of it. So those are two sort of acronyms and techniques for a whole new discipline that's springing up now called prompt engineering. But that's a very brief introduction. In the chat, there is a University of Sheffield prompt bank, which gives you some keywords, some ideas as to how to use certain prompts to get certain outputs. It's quite short, but it's actually, I think it's reasonably good for us to get started. And then, what I'd like to do with the last 15 minutes or so, is that all right, Caroline? Mm-hmm. Is just very simply show you how quick it is. So if you wanted to use Gemini, develop a new module. I know because I've done this.
Mike, can I ask, is it true or is it possible that if you're polite to Gemini, you get better responses?
Well, I first started doing that just naturally because maybe my mum, I blame my mother. So I first started using that, sort of saying please or would you, may. You know, may is a word that hardly anyone uses nowadays. And then afterwards, after using it so long, I can touch type, but I'm not very accurate, so I just go da-da-da. And I don't think it makes a difference. Or at least I haven't noticed a difference. So, are you comfortable with having a go, just to see how easy and quick it is? It's not going to give you a great, well, at least I hope it's not going to give you a great module with the complete content or whatever, but I reckon in 10 minutes you could, if you were doing something, it would save you hours. I would be quite precise to begin with and then start modifying it. So what I would do is I'd say, create it, this is the subject, this is how many lessons I want, and then when it comes out, then you can go, what I did was then go, right, what are the key points for lesson number 1? What are the key points for lesson number 2? And then drill further down. And then for those key points, something like, can you suggest an assessment or a multiple choice quiz? Caroline says, how do we get into Gemini? If you open up a web browser and you just stick in Gemini or Google Gemini, sign in. So for everyone, for Gemini, if you've been watching the screen, which actually I haven't because Catherine was doing, you simply go to Google Gemini, you log in with your university login.
But ours is not asking us to log in.
No, because you're probably already logged in on your machine. So if you're already logged into university, it will go straight in.
Right, someone says, how do you use Gemini to summarise a PDF file without sharing the file publicly?
With Gemini here, because if you're logged in as your York University login, it won't be public, but it will be visible within York. So if I go through the prompt engineering process for this little workshop, so topic, precise, detailed. As I was talking to, sorry, I forgot you. Louisa. She said, I'm thinking about starting like this, and she was quite right. What she said, tell it the title, tell it the level, tell it how many weeks. So that's the topic, the first, and also tell it what level. So then the output, what kind of output do you want? So the output then would be give me an 11 or 12-week set of individual lessons with the main key points. And then she said, well, how would you then go on? So I said, well, if you've got this right, sometimes this is not required. But then the next thing, iterate, is then go through lessons by lesson. So the first lesson, tell me the detail. And then, what kind of output do you want? I want the key points for the lesson. I want a multiple choice quiz to test them at the end. I would like a reading list. Although I was talking to another one of your colleagues just now, he asked me, on the journal, how do you detect AI output, plagiarism? At the moment, the first thing I look for is the reading list. Yeah. But people are getting better.
I just wanted to say we used it for looking at some student work within the school, and you can also tell it what your reading list is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's your modifier. Yeah, that's your modifier. So, iterate, go week by week, and then at the end as well, summarise it. So, just an example of how prompt engineering would work on this example. That's how I would approach it anyway.
I had a really good result in having a nice module and then saying, please could you rewrite, please do answer this request again, but write it as if it was going to go off to a quality assurance committee.
Yeah.
and it wrote me a different version that was perfect. To give to that environment.
That's your output and your modifier. Yeah, to improve what you want.
Because it is, you are teaching it in a sense, so it is remembering what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so you'd want to put in the module descriptor, you'd want to put in any accreditor standards from external, you might want to add some sources of literature, for example, if that's allowed within, as long as you're logged in. You know, so you're literally training it to then give you back what you want. And the more you put in and the more critically you engage with it, the higher quality, or you'll have more usable the outputs will be.
That's the thing about it, isn't it? The more you engage with it, the more you put into it, if you think about it, if you evaluate, if you analyse the output, then you're going to get better.
I keep thinking they call it ChatGPT for a reason. You're supposed, it's a conversation, isn't it? That back and forth dialogue.
I'm going to do the last thing so I can, where was I? Hang on. I scroll down. Yeah. So, the last thing I wanted to finish off with is this. Here are the university guidelines. They're vague. But it's something to start with.
They're a principled framework, really, aren't they? Because you've got to make it live. And I'm not sure you can write it all down. That's the challenge.
Well, it's moving so quickly as well that there will be a point where it slows down where we probably can get better or clearer guidelines. And I know that we are working on them at the university. It just takes a long time. And so, finally, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Just 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. Hold your horses, online and offline. Just a quick reminder. So this was the first one out of our series of 7. So the next one is on the 11th of February. That's going to be by Mike again. He's going to do the basic number 2 to make us all more professional with this.
Is that the second part of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's more of a deep dive into the teaching and learning and what it means, and a bit more exploration.
There is more detail in your calendar invite,
Yeah.
so there's actually a bit more of a description. We just didn't want to put it all on the slides, to be honest. Then there's a bit of a reminder about the survey we had, but also the certificates, one last time. So we thought, because there's 7 workshops, and for anyone who needs some professional development, if it's for a future job application, promotion application, or just a PDR, anyone in the room, you will have to sign a piece of paper. Everyone online, we can just download the names. But if you're actually interested, it's not compulsory for anyone. It's just an additional, if you come to 4 or more of these events, then you get a certificate from us. So if you want one, just sign the paper on your way out. Thank you very much. And if you can fill in the survey, that would be great. Otherwise, have a great day. And thank you, and see you in the next one.
Thank you.